Yep.
I would like to call the Madison Public Schools Board of Education meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have a full board today. Thanks for all for being here. We have really good attendance and today's no exception. Item 2, school community session. Any members of the public would like to speak? I know that Emily will give a little.
Yep, good evening. So for people in person and anyone on Zoom, the board welcomes public comment at our meetings. We ask when speaking to please state your name and address. Comments are limited to 3 minutes in order to ensure that all interested parties have an opportunity to speak. I will let you know when your time is up. We're happy to hear from our community, but at a meeting such as tonight's, it should not be expected that the board or administration will respond. The public comment period is not a time for public discussion. If necessary, the community member will be contacted for follow-up. So if you're joining us tonight via Zoom, please raise your hand and you will be called upon. Do we have any members of the public in person who would like to speak during this time? Do we have anyone online who would like to speak? Okay, thank you.
I always feel so bad that you have to read that whole
That's good for the record.
Okay, so tonight is a presentation meeting rather than a board business meeting, and we have a special presentation this evening on special education that is being presented by Ms. Battaglia and others. So, welcome.
Thank you
Yourself,
for having us.
thank you very much.
Well, I'm really excited to be here. I'm talking obviously about my favorite topic, special education. And so who I have with me is the team, because we really work as a leadership team in the special education department. So I have Sherry Farmer, who is the elementary special education coordinator, Kim Dunn, who is the high school special education coordinator, and Kristen Skelly, who is the middle school special education coordinator. And to talk a little bit about some of the things that they do as special education coordinators, because it is much different, I think, than the other coordinator roles that we have in the district. These coordinators don't have any students on their caseload or teach any classes because of all the different tasks that they need to complete. So Kristen, if you wouldn't mind kind of, sure, did you want to start? And then Kim, you'll start and then we'll go.
Good evening. So some of the many things we do include obviously IEP meetings and helping to facilitate those and finalize and review the documents related to IEP meetings. Typically, the coordinators will attend on average maybe like 200 IEP meetings a year. Obviously, along with that, it's about an hour meeting, and then afterwards working with school staff to finalize the document and making sure that it's has all the required components and everything that needs to be in it. And we do that also this year with CT SED, so that added a little bit of extra time to that component of our jobs.
And just to add in, so CT SEDS is the new state IEP system. So the state, in the past, we used Frontline, had a program which was called IEP Direct, that we used and about 90% of the districts in the state use, but districts could use their own IEP program. The state went to pay for it and took it over and redesigned the IEP and also had a new program. The new program has definitely been a little bit of a challenge. I do have to say, I think things we did, such as being proactive on being part of all of the new IEP meetings that they held last year before it was rolled out on July 1st. Once when it was rolled out on July 1st, they had the coordinators in. We also then allowed for staff to come in over the summer to go over and kind of play with the new system. So I think that, although there's definitely questions still almost about every day, and they keep updating some glitches, which sometimes add a new glitch. So it definitely has been challenging and a lot of work. But I definitely think, you know, we've also, I think, gone into it with a more positive attitude than other districts. And when we've been finalizing IEPs right away, where some other districts, it was taking a couple months. So we've just really been, learning this new system and all of its faults and there are some good things to it too. So eventually we will get it mastered. It's only March, it came out in July 1st. Still got a little time. Sorry about that.
Okay. In addition to that, we also collaborate with parents and students outside of IEP meetings. At the elementary level, Sherry does a lot with helping families through that initial identification process and working with families as they're, first starting with special education. At the middle school level, helping them with the various transitions that they have and during those challenging years for students. And then at the high school level, doing a lot of work with parents and families to work with them to transition and making sure students have, the necessary skill to be successful in post-secondary life. And then we also provide a lot of supports to the various people in our buildings, general education teachers, special education teachers, administrators, support staff. We consult about students, we'll meet with the team if they have any issues that they need to discuss or questions, brainstorming things. As coordinators, we're on the various leadership teams in our buildings, sometimes going to SST meetings and other things of that nature. So really involved in helping a lot of our professionals in the building work with our special education students so that everyone can be successful.
It's just a little bit more about the providing support. As you all know, I'm sure as board members, special educators are in high demand, and it is a shortage area across the country. So as my first year as coordinator last year, I had 7 new teachers at the elementary level. So we really wanted to find a way to support those teachers, make them feel welcome, make them feel capable of being able to do their job. They all came back this year, so I took that as a win. And we really are working on mentoring them. That's an area that I feel passionate about. So working to support all of the people that support our students is really something that we've worked as a new staff of coordinators to improve upon. We also evaluate the special education staff. So we really do have a pretty rigorous evaluation process here in Madison for our new teachers. That involves what we call a case study in which they're evaluated, observed 3 different times over a period of 3 months. And we follow that same student and work with them through the goals and objectives they set for that student and how they're implementing that student's plan. And that's been a really powerful way for me to be able to see areas that staff can improve on and areas that we can continue to support their growth. We also participate and facilitate meetings for our department and special programs. Depending on the building, it could be weekly meetings, bi-weekly or monthly. We also work with the principals in our buildings and do faculty meetings as well as some PLCs when we're asked to do so. We determine purchasing needs in regards to our school budgets. And we review evaluations and determine appropriate services for students when they're evaluated, like Kim said, at the elementary level, that is where many of our students are identified. So we're really looking at those evaluations and determining what services we need to put into place for those students. And then finally, we do oversee the implementation of the students' IEPs. And like Kim stated, that's about 200 to 250 meetings per year that each of us are conducting in our respective buildings and overseeing, finalizing those IEPs and ensuring that they're implemented with fidelity.
Sure. So that's about at least 2 hours a day, right? IEPs to follow up. Does that include to try to enter it into the software?
Usually do that at 9, yeah, but no.
Yeah.
Yes, no, that does include that.
We're looking at about 3 hours a day. then,
At least.
just on IEPs. Okay, thank you.
And there's more.
Yes.
So, good evening. In addition to the many duties that have been shared already, there are definitely some other aspects of our role that I think would be important for people to know. So not over the oversight of our special education related service staff and teachers, we also oversee paraprofessionals and registered behavior technicians. One of the parts that I love collaborating with the supervising teachers or the case managers and having discussions with them on, how they can provide effective feedback and guidance to their support staff so that those support staff can, successfully meet the academic needs, social, emotional needs, behavioral needs of our students. I think we take a large role communicating with outside agencies and providers as well as the families, as we noted. We're tasked with collaboration and communication with outside consultants that might be coming in, or specialists, and then we would schedule some of those follow-up meetings with our staff to review those recommendations that they're providing for us. We also coordinate some of our independent evaluations, so we're kind of the contact person for that. So kind of setting up, more scheduling of the time that someone would be coming in for observations, meeting with families and students. Depending upon the building that you're in and the staff that's already in the building, some of the coordinators might even be helping identify some of the daily coverage needs and shifting kind of staff around to kind of help to make sure our students are, their services are being met. We work very collaboratively, as both coordinators and Liz said, with the regular education staff, the interventionists, and the counselors. We have a bigger role in even the referral process now from the start. We definitely are developing those transition plans for students who might be returning from out of district and assisting with the implementation of those plans. Also, I think the transition plan itself, Sherry and I work very closely when they're moving from 3rd to 4th grade, and internally within our buildings, even from grade to grade. Kim and I work obviously for 8th to 9th grade. We also kind of put that HR hat on. We're assisting with kind of the screening and interviewing and hiring and doing some reference checks on our new staff members, and then training those staff, as Sherry noted. A big piece of our role is also assisting with curricular resources, and we really appreciate Dr. Dellinghenge has really seen I guess the benefit of integrating special education with regular education, and we're taking a more active role in some of the curriculum work, both at the beginning of the school year and throughout the school year, and the work within the buildings with our coaches has been excellent, really collaborative. Ms. Farmer does our ESY right now, so that's our extended school year at summer school. So that's another role of the coordinators if they should choose to take that on during the summer. Even our behavior intervention plans, when we're working with our board certified behavior analysts, we take a role in that and helping how that gets implemented in safety plans for some of our students. We have some great central office staff that are like wizards with our smarter balance and our tied settings into the portal, into the database system. But as coordinators, we are kind of charged with also reviewing those, making sure that they're in there, adding things as necessary, and working closely with both Gail and the central office staff. And the CT said has been a challenge, but there's a lot of great things about it too. So certainly I think we wear a number of hats in this role, but I know that I can speak for the other two coordinators too, that we appreciate working under the leadership of Dr. Battaglia, and very supportive, building administrators and central office staff.
Is that all you guys do?
It is nice. Sure.
So kind of where does special ed, what is special ed and what isn't it? So all students, as you know, receive general education. Now, part of general education is that tiered intervention that I'm sure we've talked about, the scientifically research-based intervention, student tier 1, 2, and 3. that all falls under general education support. Now, students at any time could be referred to special ed. And I try to, if thinking about maybe two students, so having a student with, ADHD that has ADHD, but is able to complete tasks, is able to get tests done within the set amount of time, they have a documented disability, but that would just fall under general education. If I move on to a 504 plan, if I have ADHD and now I require accommodations such as extended time to finish a test, or I require taking a test in a separate setting, that is going to be when I need a 504 plan. Students can also fall under 504 plans if they have things such as anxiety comes up a lot. So if they have anxiety where they need accommodations to provide them with access, that would be under 504s. So 504s are still considered general education support. To have a 504 plan, you must have a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits a major life activity. And like I said, these are accommodations. One thing, when I came into the district, I wanted to learn more about 504s because my background in special ed, that wasn't an area I had as much training in. So when I met with my lawyer, that's when I had found out that, all students with any life-threatening food allergies or bee stings, they all need to have 504 plans in order to make sure we are giving them the appropriate accommodations and also protecting them as well as the district with the rights. So when I came in, our numbers went whoop up with 504 plans, because you can imagine there are a lot of students with life-threatening food allergies or bee stings. And other areas where students can fall in, diabetes, cancer. You could also have a 504 plan for something like dyslexia. So for example, we have students that maybe require special education when they're younger for dyslexia, but then no longer need the specially designed instruction, only need accommodations. And so they may end up just having a 504 plan, which is ideal because basically when you go to the college level, there is no more special ed. It is basically just accommodations from 504. So that is always ideal. And then we get into what is special education. So special education is specially designed instruction at no cost to meet the unique needs of a child with a disability. The instruction means adapting as appropriate to the needs of the eligible child under this part, the content, methodology, and delivery of instruction. And we want to work to the unique needs of the student's disability, and it's to ensure access to the general education curriculum. So if I have a student that has ADHD that needs to be explicitly taught executive functioning skills in order to compensate for their ADHD, that would fall under special education, because it's not just about providing accommodations, it's about providing that specially designed instruction. Yep.
Can I ask a question now or should I wait?
I'm just gonna one more comment and then you can,
Okay.
so, and going back to a question earlier, or previously from the email, if a student has a mental health condition such as anxiety that limits their access to the general education classroom. So if my anxiety is so bad, I cannot make it into school. And we've put into place different accommodation or different strategies through tiered intervention, and they're still not being able to come and access. That would make them eligible for special education, because then their disability, such as anxiety, is impacting their ability to access the general education classroom, which is requiring specially designed instruction. So sorry.
So a student could move back and forth between special education and 504. And who determines then which one they are?
So, yeah, so for, both for special education and for 504 plans. So first, there is a process of getting into it. Then we look at those plans every year. Every 3 years, we determine whether or not you continue to qualify for services. So at those meetings, so those are called triennial meetings, we would determine if the child still needed special education. If they did not, no longer need special education, but still need accommodations, then they would go into the 504 meeting. And
Is
so
that
that would be the
something that
team.
like a parent could request that you do?
Parents can request on 504 or IEP meetings to go into special education at any time. Yeah. Technically, you can have both, but having an IEP or special education is more, encompasses more. So it's, we typically will just have a student on one or the other. But yeah, so every year we update plans, and then every 3 years we determine whether students continue to qualify for services.
Can I ask a quick question about the student that is home and unable to attend that qualifies for special education? How do they get their services then?
Yeah, great question. So what we do is, you know, again, depending on the individual student, is how we are going to implement teaching those strategies. So what we want to do is we get the staff to teach strategies in order to, you know, one of the things, like, for example, with anxiety is getting over that threshold, right? It's so hard to kind of just get over that step into school. So having staff go into the home to provide education, to provide strategies, working with the family, working with also any, you know, we work closely, like you said, with outside counselors, and giving them the tools that they need in order to come into the classroom. And we work with students, you know, we will have students on different transition plans, transitioning back to a full day. So if a student, maybe something had happened where they've had a challenging mental health issue where they haven't been able to come to school. So we work with the student and work on a plan to slowly get them back in. So at first it may be just coming into the building, and then our expectations keep going up.
Now, are they being educated at home, or is it all the process of getting back to school so they can get educated?
Yes, I mean, if a child requires hospitalization or homebound instruction, so there's actually a board policy that we have that we will follow. So if a student ends up fitting that criteria for homebound instruction, we would provide that. You know, we do try to, you know, push and educate into the classroom, because as we know, many of our students go on to college. And so that is getting them into that setting is important, but we work with every student because every student is different. There is no plain roadmap. It's always, wait, we've got a new situation. But it is important that students don't, you know, fall behind. Another thing is if a student had some challenges and maybe missed some schooling or had some reduction of time, we look at the curriculum to see what are those core components that they need to, you know, work on, and, you know, whether in tutoring or whatever we need to do to make sure, because the last thing we want to do is have them to fall behind, because that would add on to the stress. So I think we've done a really good job at kind of keeping kids up to pace. One of the things when I started here, you know, I didn't know about, you know, the trimester model. Is this good, or is this, the trimester model is really wonderful at the high school because it allows for, you know, a student, if they had challenges during the first trimester, to then start fresh in another math class. Whereas if it just went all year round, like many other high schools, we wouldn't have that opportunity. So it really has been, I think the trimester model has been very helpful. The other thing that's helpful with our model with the class is not rotating. So it makes it easier when we have students who are having challenges coming in, we've got the same classes at the same time each day. Whereas if it was a rotating schedule at the the high school level, it would be more challenging.
At what ages would you say that school avoidance to keep them up?
So we've, you know, it's interesting. So before we had ESS at Polson, when I first came in, I had some cases that there was some higher attendance, but then at Polson, it was really ramping up, but there wasn't that kind of, you know, you're earning of credit. So it's kind of, they got into some bad habits. And then came to high school where you have these credit expectations and we were just really it falling flat right away. Since we've had ESS in place, that has really been helpful with having students be available and come into school and not kind of build those habits because we have a program to address that. Prior to ESS, at the middle school, you know, we were kind of would put into place some different strategies, but it wasn't a succinct kind of set program. Oh, so there's definitely been a big difference because I'm not having a group of kids that are hitting high school that have been avoiding classes. They've been going to class because we have those interventions in place.
So, one of the questions that I posed in advance that you started to touch on, but I just want to plumb it a little
Yeah,
bit deeper. We're in a mental health crisis right now, not just us in Madison, but the whole country. And it involves not only students, but also staff. But definitely students have skyrocketed in reporting anxiety, varying levels of anxiety, depression, high levels of suicidal ideation. And we, as a board, we've acknowledged that, and we're working hard with the district and yourself to kind of work through some of this. We're doing a lot of SEL programming, which is social emotional learning programming, and we're adding some mental health professional supports. And this is all a very deliberate process by the board and the district working together and budgeting and thinking through it. So my question with that background is, are there more students being identified with varying levels of anxiety and depression, and even suicidal ideation? And are the supports that we're providing enough? Do you anticipate the need for more? Can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
So one thing I know we put into place, I think it was either last year or the year before. Sorry to get my time. So it's been about 1.5 to 2.5 years. It was about the time we did the suicide training. We put into place a suicide protocol for the district. So that way, when a student says, you know, I want to kill myself, that we have a plan. So we use the Columbia Suicide Screening Assessment. And based upon the answers in that assessment, whether or not it goes from, you know, a conversation with the, you know, family to calling 911. So having that said, being in place, we have been using that quite, you know, frequently. I don't recall the last time I checked at the high school numbers, I think it was December. But I think they had about 8 times approximately. They had used that screener already for students. And in terms of what we're seeing in the numbers, so on one of the slides, I have the numbers of students overall in the district. And what you're going to see is it has gone up. So in 2013, we were around 10%, and now we are at almost 15% of the students identified. And a lot of that does have to do with seeing it with the mental health. I mean, to be quite honest, you know, the typical just student with learning disabilities no longer exists, right? Our students are much more complex and have a lot of complex needs. We're also seeing some things from COVID that I don't think we could have necessarily anticipated. Like there's this new terminology of being like having COVID autism, that students, because of lack of socialization during COVID, are displaying symptoms of autism, even though they don't fit that criteria. And I can tell you what I see at TCLC, the preschool, and the amount of, you know, we have our last child find, our numbers are already filled. You know, we are definitely kind of seeing that issue, and what things that the board has helped to support us. So over the years, like when we've closed Island, we still kept the school psychologist. So every school has a school psychologist. The board in helping us to have a social worker in every school has been huge, to have that kind of assistance with mental health support. I think, what could be more as you continue to do things, and I know Gail is working with the school counselors on a curriculum where they're going into classrooms. Because that, special ed is reactive, right? I mean, there are certain students that are born with their disabilities and challenges, and then other ones were reactive. Anything that we can do that is proactive so that students don't get to the place where they require it is ideal.
Can I just add on a little?
Yep.
So at Brown and Polson, one of the neat things that I saw this year, in relation to some of our kids who have anxieties, we had our social workers present to the math department in both buildings, because there's a lot of research around math anxiety, and just really talking to the teachers about kind of what to look for, and also strategies that they could implement in there. So the feedback from those sessions was really powerful from the teachers and the coaches and the social workers. We also, obviously at Brown, we don't have the ESS, Effective School Solutions, but the counselors, are very involved with our kids with anxiety, and really looking at it, if there needs to be any shift in their services. And at Polson, I know the grade level counselors, as well as our social worker and school psychologists, really look at, even executive functioning skills that can cause more anxiety for kids when they're struggling with their time management, or they're struggling, even just to look on Infinite Campus and see what kind of grades they have, and what assignments are missing. So there are like little things that we're implementing a little bit more than we've had to do in the past, but that are beneficial.
Yeah, one of the issues that we're facing is that some of the social workers that we've added were under the ESSER grant, and that ESSER grant runs out next year. So the board are going to have to respond to that challenge, probably by finding some budgetary funds to continue the same level, at least, of social worker coverage. Do you think that's adequate coverage for now?
I mean,
it's even more. What's
I definitely think having the social workers is crucial, especially because if, and I know in another slide, we'll talk about the different types of positions we have, but our school psychologists who are also, right there on the front lines helping out, they do a lot of the special education testing, which takes up a lot of time when, which is very important information. It helps us to be able to program for the student, so it's valuable time. But having somebody there to be able to deal with in the now, I'm feeling upset. Again, I think what we're doing with the classroom, I think, yes, keeping what we have, having somebody in every school is very important. And we had the social worker between two elementary schools before, and that, to be honest, is very challenging, having a mental health person in two different schools, because if that's my person that I go to and I'm not feeling well, it makes it more challenging. So having, two people in each of the schools, the school psychologist and the social worker, and then also having that social worker part of with school counselor to provide that preventative, those strategies of what to do, how to manage stress. We're all feeling stress, right? As you said it, I'm always trying to assist with the mental health of my staff, myself. I tell them when to turn off their emails if they're working too late, and how you have to balance things. So I think that these proactive strategies, if we can make sure that we can keep implementing these, so we don't have students that it builds up to be in crisis, is very important.
I acknowledge your diplomatic, not going out on a limb and saying anything more. But I also acknowledge we might need to.
I mean, I would definitely say we definitely need to keep the staff that we have through the ESSER grant. I would definitely recommend that. In terms of, next slide, so a lot of times there's a little confusion about what modifications are and accommodations are. And the reason why I think it's important is two things. In special education, we can give you modifications. For If you're under a 504 plan, you're just getting accommodations. The other thing is that when you go to college, you can get accommodations in the classroom, but you don't get modifications. So I think it's very important to talk about the difference of those words. So Sherry, if you want to.
Yeah, so when we're designing an IEP for a student, we're really looking at whether that student requires modifications or accommodations. And those two things, we're looking at the what we teach versus the how we teach. So if a student requires modifications to their programming, we're looking at changing what we're teaching. The nice thing about us being involved with the general education planning piece is we're now able as special educators to pull out what are the most important concepts that that student needs to know. If we are modifying that curriculum, what's the most important vocabulary that they need to pull out of that unit, and then we're able to program more effectively for that student. If our students require more significant modifications, such as our phase program, we're really looking at those functional skills. What does that child need in order to live a healthy and as independent life as possible? Accommodations, many of our students, and most of them actually fall under this category for accommodations, and that's how we present the information. So our students may need what we call at the elementary level to ear read, meaning they need to read aloud accommodation. Many of our students with dyslexia are very capable of meeting grade level expectations in regards to how they interact with peers and they talk about a text. And we don't want their inability to decode what's on the page to prevent them from displaying their ability to have really meaningful conversations with their peers. So we provide accommodations such as that, extended time. When we're talking about those standardized tests, not our favorite thing in special education, we want to make sure that we're giving them all of the accommodations that they need to be successful. So if they need extended time, if they need a separate setting to prevent them from becoming distracted, if they need that read aloud accommodation, we're really looking carefully at each student and making sure that we're programming appropriately for them and giving them what they need to be successful.
Thank you. And now we've got a different continuum of special education services. I know we've touched upon a little bit of hospitalization. Kristen, do you want to kind of talk about that?
I mean, this slide is pretty self-explanatory in terms of the continuum of services provided. So effective delivery of special ed services requires a variety of settings. However, the focus really should be on the least restrictive environments, what we call the LRE. So the LRE is a guiding principle in the Individuals with Disabilities Act. So the LRE requirement necessitates that students with disabilities receive their education alongside their peers without disabilities to the maximum extent possible. And students should not be removed from general education classroom unless learning cannot be achieved through the use of those supplementary aids and services. So the continuum of services identifies kind of different service delivery models that would provide the individualized instruction, especially designed instruction. So it's dependent upon each student. It's going to depend upon what the PPT team discusses and what goes into the actual individual education plan. So some students may move from that general education classroom to the general ed classroom with more accommodations and supports, and then more to a classroom maybe that is co-taught by the regular ed and a special ed teacher. And I know Sherry in a minute will talk a little bit more about some of the professional development that's been done at the elementary level around the co-teaching model and the implementation of it. Some students might require a more self-contained classroom. That's going to be more intensive level of special ed instruction. It could typically, might just be a student who requires that for one subject, or it could span a number of subjects that they require that for. It will also assist some of our students who are emotionally dysregulated, so who need those regulation strategies in order to be available for the learning process. And then some students, you'll see will require a more restrictive setting, where they might need to be in a separate school setting, or an institution that has a higher level of care for them for a period of time.
Last year, we started working on implementing more co-teaching here in the district. We're starting at the elementary level and moving our way forward. I did some work with teachers on the why behind this, why this was important with our special ed staff. We talked through some of the challenges and barriers that have presented themselves in the past with rolling out co-teaching, and really had some nice, rich discussions surrounding that. At the beginning of this year, we paired each teacher in each of the elementary buildings with a general education teacher, and they are co-teaching with that teacher for at least one period of the day. And it's been really nice working with both the principals at the elementary levels. They've been very supportive of this in working with both the general and special education teacher. We did professional development in both buildings at the beginning of the year with both the general ed teachers and the special educators. And we've done a mid-year check-in with the teachers. We've also done some walkthroughs, taking a look at the work that we've seen, data that's coming back. Teachers are reporting that they feel very proud of their work that they're doing together. The co-teaching teams have worked really nicely. We really went with teachers that were interested in doing this work first. And so it's been a really positive feedback. And the foundations work that we've been doing, we've seen a lot of improvement with those students in that classroom. And they've benefited from having those two teachers in there on a regular basis each day for that period.
Also, looking at co-teaching at high school, we have incorporated co-teaching for a while now, quite a few years, especially in our math department. The integrated algebra and geometry has been co-taught for quite a while. Also, algebra 1 classes, geometry classes, and algebra 2 classes. We've also started expanding more this year into the English department, co-teaching writing for college and career, and some of the freshman English classes. And then I know last year specifically, we also co-taught in the Spanish 1 class. As more and more students, are taking world languages, those classes have needed some more supports. So it's definitely expanded at the high school level. And I think both general education teachers and special education teachers really enjoy the process and see the benefits for all students, not just special ed students, but also the general ed students in those classes.
And so the co-teaching is a special ed teacher, like a certified staff, paralegal, because I know that there are sometimes special ed paralegal or special needs paralegals.
Educators.
Yeah. Lawyers.
Yeah,
Lawyers, so
so
I can't get that out.
teaching, there's different people use the definition different ways. For us, co-teaching is to certified professionals. And what we've been putting in place is having a special education certified teacher with a general education certified teacher.
And I know that both Brown and Polson are really looking forward to trying to look at our schedules a little bit more, because a barrier, it's an incredibly important component is that co-planning. And so schedules can sometimes affect that. So that is just an area that we continue to work on, trying to look at increasing opportunities for co-planning so that we could have true co-teaching.
But when we co-teach, the students get to stay with their peers with the instruction and they're not taken out, which is always, ideal. So we have a lot of different people that help us out for related services. So Kim, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So there's a lot of people, certainly special education teachers cannot do it all. They do a lot, but certainly not everything. So we have a lot of specialists that work as kind of consulting with staff on different students, but also providing direct instruction to students in various areas. We have our school psychologists who not only do our assessments and our triennial assessments to look at, student growth and their learning profile to see if they continue to qualify for services. But our school psychologists also offer that direct instruction in social emotional skills, along with, our social workers also do that. And then, physical therapists, occupational therapists that help, with mobility, some daily living skills. I know at the high school, our occupational therapists come in and do some cooking with students on a regular basis, helping with a variety of executive functioning and assistive technology needs that they may have. In Madison, we're very lucky to have some board certified behavior analysts or BCBAs in our buildings, really helping with our challenging students with some of our most challenging behaviors, helping us to hypothesize on why it's happening and helping the school team, come up with a plan to kind of help the student regulate their behavior so that they can access their education and be successful, hopefully in that general education environment. We have our speech and language pathologists who do a lot in terms of communication, it's not just articulation that those people do, but they do a lot with, written communication, verbal communication, like just everything about language. You'd be surprised at what speech and language pathologists can do. It seems very extensive.
Yeah.
And then we also have our nurses who, sometimes don't necessarily per IEP provide direct services to students, but certainly are very involved in the social emotional process and making sure, our students, whether they have those life-threatening allergies or any of our emotional needs and helping being met, and also very involved in that homebound education process and making sure, we're following that protocol and helping them in that area.
Thank you. And so the next slide, it just kind of shows the numbers of where the staff are at. As you can see, we have gotten to a good place where we have like a speech and language pathologist in each building, the social worker right now in each building, school psychologist in each building. At the high school, we also have an additional 0.6. We have a nurse in each of our buildings, then a health aide in our middle school and high school. Some of our physical therapist is able to, in a couple days, service all the students who need it in the district. And then we have a few occupational therapists who work throughout the district. Any type of service. So all of our related services are all to support students to be able to access the general education classroom. So for example, if a individual has some deep challenging emotional issues, we don't get into those issues and then send you off to art class. Our role is to kind of give you the strategies that you need in order to help you at school. As the same, we work with our occupational and physical therapists, follow the educational model to assist them being successful at school. And then this is what I referred to before. As you can see, our numbers went up back in 2013, around 10% to now around almost at 15%. 15% is the national norm. So we are kind of following along with that. When we kind of moved up, it was 12 and then 13. We've kind of been following along as those numbers have increased. So has the numbers and needs that we've seen in our district have increased.
Listen, I'm just checking on the years following 2019, that's 2020.
Oh, yes, yes. Oh, we looked at the draft. Oh, I thought, yeah.
Just
Yeah.
to clarify.
Yes, that's 2020.
I have a question
Yep.
for you. So if you were to add 2022
Mhm.
and add the non-disabled with the disabled,
Mhm.
you would get 2004-26. Is that student? That's students, correct?
Yeah, so overall in the district, we have 2,060. This was taken, I believe, in October, from the October 1st. Every year, my assistant looks at it. So at that time, I believe that was the number.
Okay.
And then 358 of those qualified for special education
Okay.
services.
So if you were to take that number and then give the ratio of what it would be per school.
Yeah, so we actually
where's that?
so I do, I don't have it here, but I do have a breakdown for the schools.
Okay.
So I can share that with you. So we 3 times a year, I look at the data. So in October, the end of January, February, and then at the end of the year, I look at every single grade level and every single school, what the numbers are, what the percentages are, and then also what are those different categories. And then we look at all of the data for that.
If you can just get that to.
Yep, I'll send that to
so
Craig. Yep.
They can disseminate it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So when you say disabled, it means all the students that have the 504 and the special education together?
No, because 504, they are considered general education, so
Okay.
only those with special education. So although section 504, requires an impairment, it is not necessarily when I say, special education or disabilities, I'm referring to those falling under special ed, having individual education plans.
And your numbers would compensate for students that are taught outside in a different district, if you will, or at home, correct?
Yeah, so we have the breakdown. So I have the breakdown of all the different schools and then the students who are outplaced.
Okay.
And I'll get into those outplacement numbers in a couple of slides. So as a district, we have something called, it's a child find obligation. It's to make sure that we find any individuals who may have a disability. This is why they talked about that student study teams or SST process that they have is to look at student data and also to make sure we are constantly looking to see, do any students we have in district qualify at the preschool level, because we don't have everybody at the preschool. At our integrated program, we offer something at Child Find Days, where if you suspect your child may have a disability, you can bring your child in for screening. At that screening, we may give you strategies, or we may say it should be a referral to special education.
One quick question. So in our district, are the children seen by their doctor first to define the disability before they come to you? So they have a doctor's note, in other words, or a doctor's referral.
So for a 504 plan, that is a typical process. Sometimes they will, although districts can't require a doctor's note, we could always do testing. So for example, if I think my child has ADHD, typically, and I want accommodations, you may come in and get a doctor's note, but districts can't require that. So we could do testing as part of that 504 plan to qualify for special education. Regardless, even if we have a note, we go through comprehensive testing to determine if their disability is accessing their access to the general education curriculum, and then also to be able to write a comprehensive individual with education plan.
Okay, so then along with, say, a child has cancer, medical disability.
Yeah.
That would need a doctor's note, right? And then the doctor's accommodations, and then the school would follow that like a healthcare.
Yeah, so that would fall, under the 504, where if you had cancer and they were to require accommodations, that would, yes, we would, use the information from the doctor
That
to
would be
assist us.
separate. That would be a 504 and then a healthcare plan.
Yes, yeah, and that would, and depending if it gets to the point where they require specially designed instruction for it, then we would go into that special education process. But yeah, under the 504 plan, and that's where we put our individual healthcare plans. And then sometimes, students will have individual healthcare plans, which we include, into our IEPs.
Right.
So the child find, yeah.
So do we have, is there special training to identify dyslexia?
So it's funny that you bring that up. The state is always going and promoting and pushing, additional training. So we've had a dyslexia group in our district, which we actually made up a guiding document that went off the state's definition for dyslexia, because the state's definition and some other outside individual's definition for dyslexia is different. So we made up a guiding document that we can use to make sure we're following what the district guidelines are. And so that is done as a team. We actually are now, obviously with COVID, we had other things, but Sherry Farmer is working on revising. A woman who was running our dyslexia committee retired. So Sherry has taken that over. So we will continue to, as changes, look at that guiding form, and then also look at different tools for assessments. So there's a new tool for assessment that, if you want to talk about that, Will.
Sure,
The
it's
tool.
called the Test of Dyslexia, and our first committee meeting is going to be in April. We're going to be taking a look at this tool, determining if it's something we want to bring on board here in the district, and how we would utilize that and roll it out if we chose to use it. It has a really, it looks promising, but we just really want to take a deep dive into it. It provides general ed as far as the intervention piece goes, a very scripted plan for how to provide interventions for students that may flag for dyslexia. And then it moves into the special ed piece and what you might do if the child does qualify for special education, recommendations as far as programming goes for that. As well. So we're going to be taking a look at that as part of the dyslexia committee that we have just formed post-COVID to start that work again. The state's also come out with some other guidance for us that we're going to be taking a look at as well. We were just at a conference last week. And we're given some information there that we want to talk with the committee about, looking at patterns of strengths and weaknesses. It's another way that we can kind of work to identify our students with dyslexia. So we're going to be talking about that as a committee as well.
And we've had the committee, we have representatives from each school. So then that way, each school has somebody who is kind of the expert in that area.
But each teacher is not necessarily trained to identify it, or?
Oh, that's part of when we go through our special education training. We've also provided to staff over the years. So structured literacy is the type of intervention that should be used for dyslexia. There's lots of different programs out there. So including Wilson and Orton Gillingham. So we have, I provided structured literacy training to staff. We have staff trained in the Wilson program. We have staff trained in the Orton Gillingham program. Recently in February, we had not only some special ed staff, but also some speech and language pathologists go through the train and interventionists go through the training as well for Orton Gillingham.
And I think also during, the IEP process, and whether it's initial or reevaluation, when those dyslexia concerns are brought to the team, we do plan a comprehensive evaluation to look at that. So it's not just, the special ed teacher, but we pull in the school psychologist, the speech and language pathologist, we'll do a piece of the evaluation to look at that language component. The special ed teacher does the achievement evaluation. And, the team gets back together with the parents and everyone else on the team to really look at all the data and really the whole learning profile of the student to come to a decision on whether, a student qualifies for special education under dyslexia or not. So it's not just one person, but really a whole team looking at the information.
And first you would qualify under specific learning disability. And then if it's under specific disability, then we can consider dyslexia. The child find that we have, they come, like I said, to the preschool a couple of times a year. It's been very busy. And then back in June 2020, so once when we were starting to talk about opening up restaurants and things again, the state came out with guidance that so students, when they turn 3, that is when they qualify for school services from the district. So we start with students, typically a couple months, if they're in birth to 3 services, a couple months before they turn 3, we will my preschool staff will go to a transition meeting. We have a PPT to determine if we think they might qualify for special ed. We design testing, we do the testing, and then we come back to the table, develop a plan all before a child even turns 3. And then they would stay in district if they had significant needs and were not able to graduate at 18, if they needed the additional time to stay on because they had more significant needs, they would finish June after they turned 21. Back in June 2020, based upon a legal case, the state changed that. And so now they graduate the day before they turn 22. So it definitely does, it has, and you're going to see it on the chart, it does make my, so our students who are in 18 to 22-year-old programs, you can see when that happened, that raised the amount. Some of the students are only in school till, July or August, the middle of July or August or September. But when you're asking, at a point, who do you have for this year? I have them on. So it's definitely kind of made that number a little bigger. And then when you see it in outplacements, it will also show, because really those students are leaving at all different times throughout the school year. But it does make sense, right? If we start at 3 years old, we should go till they finish 21. The other thing is, prior to this happening, the state services, all the graduates would graduate in June, and then state services were supposed to start July 1st. They didn't always have the money. Since this has been in place, they've been able to keep services going for kids. So it's been better for kids. So yeah, so those are 18 to 22-year-old students that we have out in the district. And I'll talk a little bit about our Strive program that we have in district. But one thing that is a definite big impact on the special education department and takes up a lot of time, especially from someone sitting next to me, the private schools. So I think it's important for you guys to realize what our role is for the country school and Our Lady of Mercy. So if you want to kind of talk a little bit about what that role
Sure.
is.
So I serve as the case manager for all students at the country school and Our Lady of Mercy who may qualify for special education services. Like Liz was saying, through Child Find, we have an obligation to identify any student attending school in Madison if they are suspected of having disability. So any student, even if they're not Madison residents, if they're attending OLM or the country school and it is suspected that they may have a disability, it is Madison Public Schools' obligation to evaluate if we determine that that's necessary, and determine what programming would be necessary for them. So if right now we have 22 students at Our Lady of Mercy and the country school, 20 who qualify, 2 are in the referral process. If we determine that a child needs to be referred for special education, I am the person who sets up those meetings. It does take, like Liz was saying, quite a bit of time because there's collaboration that has to happen with either outside evaluators that we hire, or if we're working with speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists in district, we have to coordinate those.
Yeah, so our related service staff that are servicing our students also is responsible for testing. And we're not just responsible for testing students who live in Madison, but also any students who attend those schools.
So where does the cost lie on that? Like, who is?
So we get
How are we budgeting for that, number one? And how are we paying for all of that? That is a huge number.
So the test, the time it takes for the testing, the time it takes for the meetings and the plan, that is all our time that we kind of fit into all of those other responsibilities. What we do get from the IDA grant, I get a small amount of money that goes to provide services, which our private schools have used a certified professional. So right now it's a special education teacher who goes and who consults to kind of follow up on the implementation. But yes, it is a lot of our time managing the students.
So we facilitate those meetings. If the student qualifies and that student is a Madison resident, we then create a detailed individualized education plan that we share with those parents, because those parents have to be informed of what services would be available to their child if they decided to put them back into the Madison Public School system. So we do provide, if they are a Madison resident, we provide them with an individualized education plan detailing what those services would include. If they are not a Madison resident, we provide them copies of the evaluations so that they can then take those evaluations to their school districts and determine what services would be available to their children in those districts, and make a reasonable determination as to whether they want to continue to have their child be a parentally placed private school student or transition into the public school service setting so they would receive more services.
This responsibility goes to Child Find testing, and then extends at least for all students being educated in private schools within Madison, helping to develop an IEP. Once that is done, assuming they stay at country school or OLM, are we still responsible for the
not.
cost
We
of educating
we
them?
do
in
not.
alpha-based
Do not play, we do not pay for that. No,
Okay.
once the parent makes the decision not to move forward with the IEP that we placed in front of them, then it is up to the country school and OLM as to what services they would provide, because the children are considered parentally placed in a private school setting.
Are
We have to continue to meet
We do.
to, set up the annual testing.
So every.
So, we, it's, but the day to day, it's not that, and that, again, that, the individuals that they have to provide that consultation is through the IDA grant.
What about a school like Grove School, which is specifically established for students with some issues that require accommodation?
So we don't provide any, because they are a special education program, we don't provide any services. However, and this has happened a few times in my time here. If a parent, for example, had a child, they lived in Westport, and their child went to the Grove and they suspected their child had a disability, they went to their district to get tested, and their district said, no, Madison's responsibility. So we were responsible for doing the testing and to determine whether or not the child qualified for services.
And do they have enough, like not in Grove School maybe, but country school and in OLM, do they have the faculty in place to address all the?
They're not implementing our IEPs with our comprehensive programs and our related services. Whatever they choose to do, they develop a, plan between the school and the parents of whatever type of services they wish to provide. What we provide, again, is just an IDA grant. The money we get from the grant, I use the grant to pay for para-educators, and then a portion of it I need to give to the private schools. I meet with the private schools every year to determine how to spend that money. And we have used it to have, and it's about $15,000 for each school to have a certified professional consult to provide assistance for the special education students.
Liz and I have spent some time this year providing PD to the private schools as well on tiered intervention. What that looks like, how to put that into place there, to help with those referrals and things like that, so that we can just ensure that kids are getting the opportunity for that intervention before we are looking at evaluating them for special education services.
We also did on CT SEDS because, having them assist with their components on the CT SEDS part. So teaching them how to use it so that, Sherry's not writing up all of the plans, that they are participating as team members.
Meet some more people.
I know.
Well, no, it's interesting, and I'm glad you brought it up, Christine, because a lot of folks, when they're looking at our budget, don't understand the full, extent of our responsibilities
Yeah.
as a board in a district.
And you may even, like our school psychologist, looking at, okay, that's the number in the schools, not knowing that it's not just the outplay students, but it's then also, it's 22 student, so there's, yes, that's why I thought this was kind of important, because not everyone knows what our role is for the private schools.
Yeah, thank you. What was the number last year, if I may ask? So if there's 22 this year, what was it? I'm growth wise, I'm
It
wondering.
was a little higher last year, so the parents pulled children out during COVID. It's actually gone down a little, and some of the parents have put their children back into Madison Public Schools. So it actually has dropped a little bit. I don't have the exact number, but it has dropped from this year to last year.
But you got them back anyway.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
did.
so it's, yeah.
So $15,000 from the grant
It's approximately $15,000
to
each,
each school.
approximately, yeah.
And how much do we get from the grant?
We get over 600,000. I'm sorry, I think the grant altogether is like 600,000. I think we get just under $600,000. So we get a significant amount of money for this grant.
But the
Yeah.
services that you're providing
Yep.
are,
Yep, and it can't be, I did look to see if some of the time could be covered from it, but I can't use like the testing and things, I can't include that in.
Sorry, I didn't mean to roll my eyes.
Yeah. No, I know, I just, it's important for, you guys to realize all that,
It's a lot of work and it's not really compensated
Mhm.
by
That's
the,
teachers.
by the
Yeah.
grants.
That's teaching.
Yeah, yeah,
What that is.
But I mean, it's even, I think, no offense, but even more significant for special education.
I think, but I think it's important to note that teachers do work way beyond the bell.
Then, so we do have some programs in the district in order to provide a continuum of services, because we want to service as many students as we can in the district with, again, being with their peers. So this is one of our programs, the FASE, or Functional Academic Skills Education Program. We love our acronyms. And so this really is a life skills program to teach students functional skills. It starts at Ryerson. It is not, and I'll talk about the program we have at Jeffrey. And then it travels through, goes through Brown, Polson, to Daniel Hand, and then also into our 18 to 22-year-old program. And so our kind of phase program looks different at each level. So if you want to start.
Sure. So at Ryerson, we're really looking at those ready to learn skills for our phase students. Many of our students have AAC devices, and those are that's augmentative alternate communication devices. If our students are nonverbal, our speech and language pathologists and our phase teacher are working with them and teaching them how to use those devices to give them a voice so that they can participate in academic tasks. We're working on those discrete skills that they need for school readiness. We take one field trip every trimester at Ryerson. This past trimester, we went to the firehouse. The fire trucks came, but for our phase students, it was kind of overwhelming. There's a lot of kids, there's a lot of noise. So being able to go in a smaller group and experience that firehouse was really nice. We have a snack cart, we call it Snacks on the Hill at Ryerson, and each of our students has a job, and they work on, they go out usually at least two, 3 times a week, and they work on their functional communication skills. How may I help you? What would you like? Teachers are selecting snacks that they want to buy. The students are providing those snacks. They count change if they're ready. We have Snacks on the Hill bucks, so that it's like a frequent flyer kind of program that they get to clip. The teachers love it because we can send the snack in the middle of the day. And then we also have our unified sports program. And if any of you all were fortunate enough to be able to participate in that culminating activity last year with Brown, Jeffrey, and Polson, it was wonderful. So our kids do about 6 weeks of practice with that unified program at Ryerson. We have unified going on much of the year, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful program. Our OT there is very much involved, and she does a great job with the unified sports program. And so that's what it looks like at the elementary level.
Yep, and then we kind of head to Brown and Polson, and the students are engaged in activities in the classroom setting, also throughout the building and into the community, that are helping them to apply those skills that are the functional academic skills, the life skills, communication, effectively with daily living, social, behavioral, emotional regulation skills, community safety skills. In terms of field trips, I would say Brown is about bi-monthly field trips and Polson is monthly field trips. I know Brown has gone to like Lyman and Rose orchards. Kids have collected, picked apples, came back, made applesauce, went around to, greet other employees in the building and share that with them. Brown also took the train from Madison to Old Saybrook and went to Pizza Works over there. So again, working on money skills, transportation. In terms of a couple of trips to highlight for Polson, they have gone to the Dan Cosgrove Animal Shelter. So the kids will bake dog treats and make dog toys that they sell in the office at Polson. And so they're working on their money skills there. And then they'll go to the shelter and bring those a big trip. Sometimes it's just downtown to the library, to the post office, to the grocery store, over to Grand Pizza. So just opportunities for them to work on a lot of those different skills. Again, we have the unified sports program at both buildings and a huge focus on just those pre-vocational opportunities in the building, whether they're going and, sorting mail in the mailboxes, for, delivering things to classrooms, going around watering plants for different teachers. It could be shelving books in the library, making copies. We have the snack cart as well with the school store at Polson. And opportunities for typical peers to be working and going on these trips and outings and working on some of the jobs with the peers with that are in special education.
And then at the high school, we certainly do a lot of the other activities that the elementary and middle school do. But we definitely have a stronger, I think, focus on that transition and what does life after high school look like for our students in our phase program. So we do have the unified sports. Matt Link is a great coach and does a lot with the Polson and Danielle Hand teams. Also, I think it's nice to note that a lot of our out of district kids and students at Strive also come back to district to participate in our unified sports program. We also at the high school do a lot of school-based jobs, whether the library, sorting, delivering mail. I think one of the highlights this year that we have is our coffee cart. So if you're ever, in TJ's office around 8 o'clock on a Friday, we have our students going around and serving, coffee, hot chocolate, tea, other items. Sometimes they work with peers to do that. So that's a lot of nice interaction for them. We also do a lot of field trips. We're about doing monthly field trips right now. Hopefully we will get to bi-weekly. In the past, our students have gone to, Madison Youth and Family Services to do some volunteer work and helping them during the holiday season, kind of sorting donations and whatnot to give to different families in need. Our students also, go to the grocery store a lot, make shopping lists, go shopping so that we can stock our kitchen at the high school. And then students use those items to kind of meal prep and make different meals for themselves and their peers. This month, our students are going to a business downtown to do some vocational work. I think it's creatives, I want to say. Creations, there we go. And then I think what's really exciting is some students in our life skills phase program have, shown some interest in the animal field. And so next month we actually have a mobile dog groomer coming to the high school so that students can kind of see that job and see what that entails. So a lot of job work.
And be happy to supply the dog.
And then we also have a program of alternative learning. So when I was here my first year, we had some students who really needed at the elementary level who needed help with self-regulation. When I came in, I started when ESS started, but that was just at the high school, and that therapeutic model, I didn't really feel that is what we needed at the elementary model. I wanted a more educational to really teach the students the different strategies that they would need. So Catherine Hart was the principal at Jeffrey at the time. And I was like, oh, I've got this like little idea of starting this program. And she just took it right on and found me space to have it at Jeffrey. And it's been, very successful. We have the PAL program goes from Jeffrey to Brown. And then at Brown, it transitions into the ESS program. The PAL program has also kind of how we originally funded it. When I came in the district, we would get our BCBAs from ACEs and our registered behavior technicians. So when I changed it to having us hire them directly, I not only went from 1.4 BCBAs to 2 full BCBAs, went from 4 RBTs, registered behavior technicians, to 8 registered behavior technicians, and I hired a teacher. So I was able to kind of put all that together. So when we, developed it, we were able to, utilize our resources differently. So it didn't cost additional money for the district.
So when that realigns in 2025 to K to 5 or pre-K to 5 model. We anticipate
K to 5, yes. So when we see the schools, we see one having PAL and one having phase program. We did think about putting them together, but the different resources, each of them, we have, you know, the schools meet, we have the different resources, the related services both help with the morning meeting. So if we would have both in one building, you know, just in terms of time. So I do think the model, although I don't love having some kids not at their home schools, has worked. So if you're supposed to go to Ryerson, but you are supposed to be at Ryerson, but you really would qualify for PAL, we will, you know, transport you so that you can go to PAL to get the, you know, go to the school with the program that you need. Kristen, do you want to say a couple words about
It looks a little different at Jeffrey and at Brown. You know, it's based on the student's individualized needs. So we could have students who are highly dysregulated, more negative behavioral choices. We could also have kids who are just really anxious and overwhelmed, and that dysregulation affects their ability to be accessible to learning. At Brown, there's a calming room that kids can go to or are asked to go to help them with their coping strategies. There's a separate classroom space, but mostly at Brown, it's more of a morning meeting, and we have our multidisciplinary team who does the explicit instruction, and those lessons are around, you know, conflict resolution, anger management, zones of regulation, kind of size of the problem and your reaction to those, healthy coping strategies, mindfulness, positive peer relationships. And I know it's a little bit more self-contained.
It's a more intensive model at the elementary school. I think that Liz had such a great plan here. It's kind of a pay me now or pay me later model, I think. And what we feel like is if we invest the time and effort in our students here and teach them those coping skills, our hope is that we're going to see more regulated students with less anxiety as they move through their school career. So we do spend quite a bit of time at Jeffrey providing those students with that morning meeting that our school social worker, our school psychologist, sometimes our speech and language pathologist, and our PAL teacher, our BCBA on the days that she's there as well, participate in morning meetings with these students, explicitly teaching them those behavioral regulation skills. There's also a closing circle every day in which those students reflect on the goals that they set for themselves. They each set their own goals each day and they reflect on those goals. We have something called decision dollars that the kids are working, because when they're little, sometimes extrinsic motivation is kind of necessary before those things become intrinsic. So we're working on that with them as well. And just like we teach a student to read, we have to teach a student to be able to regulate themselves if they can't. And it's really affecting their access to the curriculum. So I'm really happy that this program is here. And I think it benefits a lot of our students and allows them to stay in district with their peers versus being outplaced.
And then we also have the Effective School Solutions program at the high school and at the middle school. You just want to say a couple words?
Yeah, so again, it's our in-house therapeutic program, really providing those, you know, intensive therapeutic services to our students who really require it. It's really nice that they're able to receive, you know, that daily group instruction in those coping skills and whatever other skills they need in order to be able to access their education. I think this program also really alleviates some of the stress on our other mental health professionals within the building, because when you have students coming down to you and dropping in at one time, it kind of really affects the services you're able to give all the students on your caseload. So I think having Effective School Solutions and that, you know, daily check-in for those students, it really helps all the other students in the building get the services that they need also. But they work on, you know, all those coping strategies that they need, and really you'll see there the data, you know, there's been an increase, you know, a positive increase in GPA. You know, there's been a, you know, positive direction in the number of student absences. So it really works to address a lot of the issues with school avoidance and other social emotional areas.
My favorite thing is ESS. The second year we had it in place, it was the second day of school, and a parent called the high school and said, you know, I can't get, something had happened over the summer and she couldn't get her child to come in school. So the next day we had a PPT meeting. We put the student on a diagnostic placement so we can put them on a diagnostic placement into special ed while we test. So put them into special ed, put them into ESS. got the student into school because ESS, we have a separate entrance to it. So he didn't have to, walk over the threshold of that front door, had him kind of come in the back door, worked with the student. The student did end up qualifying for services. By around January, the student no longer needed ESS, kind of went to regular special ed. And then when it was time for the triennial, no longer needed special education services. And so that's really like a wonderful example of what we love to do, is to be able to have the resources to give students what they need, give them the strategies, and then let them go off and, get them back into gen ed. And then the Strive program. So prior to me coming to the district, I worked for Capital Region Education Council, which is, for those of you, like, it's the LEARN of the Hartford region, but we worked all around the state. And in my role, I was contracted from Guilford, Madison, and Clinton Public Schools to develop an 18 to 21-year-old program. I was so happy when I came here because I'm still on the board and still get to be a part of my baby Strive. I literally, after my first baby, I developed the idea. And then when I had my second baby, that is when it started 9 years ago. And the program has been thriving. We originally had set up to have like no more than 12, and we were at like 15 or 16 and actually have a additional space because we needed to have more room. So it's been a great collaborative program, and that's for our students who are 18 to 22 who provide that additional transition services. Those students, just so you know, when I talk about outplacement, those are considered under an outplacement because it's financed through CREC. So sometimes, again, and I'll talk about my outplacement numbers are a little misconceiving when you see the whole number and seeing kind of where that breakdown is. And so the next slide talks about the outplacement. So we have 5 students who are at local magnet and vocational programs. We still have to pay for the special education services that they get. So that's why they're listed as part of my outplacement. I still have PPTs for them. Although we definitely want to encourage students to use these programs. The fees are not as much as sending someone to a typical outplacement school, but there are some fees associated with it that impact my budget. We have 13 students who are 18 to 22-year-old programs, 2 students who unfortunately are expelled, and then 16 students who are in intensive programming, kindergarten through 12th grade. So I know at first if you see 36, that seems like a larger number, but kind of in the breakdown, it's more of that. There's really only 16 kids that we're not servicing with all of our programs. And it's definitely, a revolving door. I mean, a student enrolled in the district 2 weeks before school started who was at an outplaced school. I can't have them come back before having a meeting and having planning and having time. So, it's definitely always kind of that challenge. And then we have students who are, doing well. And then there's some challenges that come up that we get to a point where they're not able to access their education in the public schools. So with the phase, the PAL program, ESF, they're all helpful, but there are still always some students who are going to require a higher level of care.
I have a question.
Mhm.
When you say the 18 to 22-year-old programs, could you just give me an example?
So like the Strive program, so all students who are 18 to 22, they have finished their high school requirements, but under the special education law, we can service them through 22. So they don't receive their diplomas, but they still need to work on transition skills, which you can go to the next slide, which is, looking at post-secondary ed, employment, and independent living. So those students are going on to different programs that provide those type of services. In addition, the students who are my most intensive, who are those 16 right now who are outplaced, many of those will qualify for that more intensive programming. So they'll stay on in their schools through 22 years old. We have had students who have been at ACES schools, for example, who have then come back to Strive. They weren't able to come back to Daniel Ann High School, but they were able to come back into our Strive program. And then I know we talked about this earlier. but, we've also been working very closely with the administration in assisting with supporting that high needs subgroups, especially grades 3 through 8 with the test scores, and then particularly Kristen, if you just wanted to share.
Yeah, I want to be cognizant of the time and the curriculum committee members that have heard a lot tonight already on this, but our high need subgroup is English language learners, free and reduced lunch, and special education. So in terms of our special education group, we've done a lot in both buildings that I've been working in, but we're looking really closely at the students' individual education goals and objectives and aligning them more with the standards. We're using our goal book toolkit resource that's helping us with that. We're also working with the coaches, both ELA and math. We're doing kind of they met with our 6th grade. They brought, some samples of their IEPs, really looked to see what was aligned with some of the, not just the standards, but the claims and the targets. We have data team meetings now that special education teachers are becoming a little bit more a part of with, really looking at where are the growth areas, what are the action plans going to be for that, coming back to those meetings with the regular ed interventionists, coaches, coordinators, and talking about, the growth on the action plans. We've done a lot of professional development that Gail has, offered as well as the building administrators. Students are getting much more familiar with just the tools that are on the actual assessments. The students have always been taking the interim assessment blocks, the IABs we call them, more the formative, but we're using that instructionally as well. We're seeing teachers both. I've done some visits to the study centers and kind of really analyzed study centers and inclusion and what's working, where do they need support or additional resources for students. We're focusing a lot on small group work. We have really looked at the accommodations. I'm having kind of good conversations with my staff about where do they need that? Are they using it all the time now? We have done some more collaborative department meeting times that were not necessarily scheduled before. We might be doing things a little bit more separated. So we're definitely trying to do a lot more integrated professional learning community work, I would say. And there's a lot more, but
well, due to time. And then 2 just quick last things. Role of the paraeducator. Kristen, did you want to say a couple words about the paraeducators?
Yeah, so we have different models of paraeducators in the building. We have some that are more classroom based, some that are more instructional and team based. We have our special assignment paras, and we have registered behavior checks and applied behavior analyst paras. It really is dependent upon the individual needs of the students. And Liz will talk about as we talk about kind of the next steps. Moving to a shift of really looking at those safety, medical and health reasons, and gen ed and special ed, which they often have done, but really getting deeper into working collaboratively on differentiating instruction and using more of the model of the instructional team model, instructional para model rather. They're an integral part of the multidisciplinary team for sure, and they help to implement some of that specially designed instruction that the certified teachers and other related service staff are creating.
And I started off as a paraeducator, so a lot of our teachers and educators were paraeducators, and so just real briefly some next steps. Continuing to expand and on our phase program. So we've had new staff take over. With new staff comes new ideas and ways for us to provide services in a different way, different work experiences within the building, out in the community, continuing that increasing co-teaching at all levels, again, if we can keep kids in the classroom and provide them with the special education services, it takes away the stigma of taking them outside of the classroom. Redefining how we're using paraeducators. We have all the classroom paraeducators. So, you know, in looking at the research really supports paraeducators supporting the teacher. And not as much for one-on-ones. But certain classrooms, you know, depending on the needs, need an additional hand in there of a paraeducator. So kind of redefining which individuals really need that one-on-one paraeducator in their IEP and which students might need another adult in the classroom in their IEP instead of a one-on-one. Continuing with our reading instruction, expanding on the services that we can provide. So for example, risk assessments are something that we've been paying out for different outside psychologists to do. It's something that, you know, we can do training and have our own staff do. So when a risk assessment comes up, we don't have to have that additional cost. And then finally, increasing parent participation and training. So I'll be sending something out, going over the new IEP with parents. And I was just talking to some parents today. We had an active SEPTO, and then, you know, COVID happened. And so it looks like that will, I'm excited at the ways we can kind of develop that again, because it was a great resource for us to kind of share what we do, different service providers or different programs. So I'm sorry, I know we went like, and I have no voice left. We went way above what I expected. Sorry, though, definitely didn't go right on time. But we're just so kind of proud of everything, you know, that we do. And, you know, we're so passionate, and I am so fortunate. So a year and a half ago, or almost now 2 years, Sherry and Kristen joined the team. And then Kim has been in district, and she's been a leader. We've built up in district, and she's taken on the role of leadership. And I just could not be happier. And I think I know all the building administrators with the support that they get from the special education coordinators. So I'm just really happy that, you know, we have such a strong team, because this is such a high performing district. So I feel that you have the best. So
We're happy to have you.
thank you.
I just want to kind of, first of all, thank you all for that really excellent, thorough presentation. I want to thank you for your passion, which clearly comes through. You know, it used to be that parents would fight to have their kids outplaced. And I think in our district, especially because of all your hard work, parents are fighting to have their kids educated in, you know, unified classrooms and with, you know, stay in district and benefit from these programs that we've set up. And it's just amazing. So thank you for all your commitment. And Liz, just on a personal note, you've shown extraordinary personal commitment that we as a board thank you and appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all of your support through everything. Happy to be
Good
here.
job. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
It was such a good presentation, like so informative. And I feel like anytime we get new board members on, we should have it again. Because it's so enlightening, and if you don't have any sort of, you know, education background coming into it, and there's like a billion acronyms. You know, it takes a while to learn exactly what you do and how you're doing it, and what everyone's role is in it. And especially, I think, new board members, it's everything is so new, and there's just so much thrown at you that it was just really enlightening. And so I thank you.
Thank you.
And it's because you grow so much every year. I mean, so much is new. I'm a parent of a special ed child who has graduated and has benefited immensely from the care and the passion that you know, that you all have shown. But I will say it's amazing all of the new things that are in place, and all of the next steps that you have planned. It's just amazing. As an educator for 35 years, I've worked in lots of different districts. This is an extraordinary panel of educators and extraordinary program and leadership, and I'm just so proud that this is what we get to benefit from, all children benefit from. I'm very grateful.
I'm grateful as well, but I'm also terrified. There's a national shortage of young people going into special education. I wonder why. You know, it takes very special people, and that's, you know. I mean, it's profound commitment, but it's a huge tap. I'm being pulled in a million different directions, so. You know, we're very fortunate that there are folks that are willing to do that work and support our young people with skill and understanding. So great presentation. Thank you.
I just want to add to that. I echo everything that has been said. Even as a not so new board member, I've been on the board for 5 years and we've had a lot of great presentations. And I know you thought you went too long, but I could have kept listening and there was so much excellent content and it was clear and I learned so much and it gave us all, I think, a much richer picture of me, I'll speak for myself, of the work that you do. And I'm wondering, I know this is recorded and it would be great to not only have this online as a board meeting thing, but an overview of what's happening in the district and special ed, because I know as a new parent to the district, I would have been really interested. I know a lot of parents would be. If we could even just take this out or, you know, post it somewhere else or share it with families, because there's just, it's just fantastic. I really so appreciate all of you and all the work that you do. So thank you.
And I'm very excited about the co-teaching model and how that will benefit everyone in a school. I mean, the fact that you know, teaching is just so isolated, and to have a buddy in the classroom, another certified teacher who's going to support all the children just as much as the regular ed. I just feel like it's such a really powerful resource, and we're so lucky that you see the value in that and that you're growing that, and I just am really excited to see what's next for all of our community. Let's do it again.
To repeat all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll have to go home and write some IEPs. Right?
No emails tonight.
So next up is board member comments, and I would like to open that by just giving you all probably an update as to what's going on with our budget that we had approved and passed. And went through the Board of Selectmen without recommended reductions, and then went to the Board of Finance. And they had a couple of Board of Finance budget workshops that one was on our last meeting night, but then I was able to attend one last week. They voted on our budget at that workshop. There was, so just to report, they looked favorably upon our efforts to find voluntarily $50,000 in additional savings that we were willing to voluntarily put up as a board. We didn't end up voting on it. It got tabled, but I sensed that we were all, probably likely to pass that. Maybe not all, but we definitely, I think it would have passed. And they appreciated that. And with that appreciation, they only reduced our budget by that amount, plus another $25,000. Some of the estimates for original asking reductions were much higher than that. And they ended up voting unanimously to reduce our budget by only $75,000. So thank you all for your hard work and dedication to our budget and your support of it. Thanks to Craig and Stacy, who also argued vociferously for the proposition that we only ask for what we need and we don't pad our budgets here. So it was a much better result than we feared, and after talking to Stacy and Craig, we can definitely absorb that other 25,000. So, thank you all.
We'll have to take another vote on it to ratify it, right?
No, the board of. There's two ways that it can be done, voluntarily by the board, if we did it before it went to the Board of Finance vote. Then we can voluntarily reduce. If not, then the Board of Finance has statutory say over any reductions. They can't specify what lines to take it out of, but they can specify a specific amount to reduce it by. The way we were able to work the public negotiation went well, and I think it ended up with a lot of deference to our budget.
So we know where the 50,000 is already coming from, because we discussed it at the last meeting, but where's the other 25,000 coming from?
So I'm meeting with the administrative team tomorrow. We're gonna start that process and we'll identify that to you, but we don't have that at this point, but
So then it will have to
Come
come
back
back
to-
to the board and we will have to vote on that.
yes, because you have to
Because we have-
reduce line items from where we are before, so.
That's what you asked.
Yeah, my thought is.
The budget.
Yeah, right, yeah, thank you, Dan.
I just want to clear that.
Great.
Any other board member comments? No, great. Go ahead.
I almost feel like based on the presentation tonight, we should have special ed go in front of Board of Finance. And, right, and literally, like, they are doing the job of probably 15 people. I have 4 of them. I mean, they're doing such an exceptional job, and with the ESSER grant and with mental health, like you had stated, being such a huge issue right now, I'm such an advocate for arguing to keep the 25,000. I mean, I just.
I see that happening.
I didn't see that happening either, but I feel like if they were more in touch with this presentation, this speaks volumes of what they're doing and how we're managing with everything, and then to cut something is just.
Well, one of the things I mentioned at the meeting was that we're balancing a lot of things, including a 9.4%
Yeah,
health insurance increase
Yeah.
this year, which we don't usually face. And also we're balancing our educational programming funding against a mental health crisis that's very real. And I did touch on that in my brief address to them. And I think that was helpful and instrumental in bringing down their reduction of our proposed increase.
But good to
And-
keep in mind for next year.
Yeah, or, we should,
Yeah,
maybe we could take that,
remember that.
we could take that section of this meeting and just share it with the Board of Finance.
yeah.
So at the next Board of Ed meeting, will we have the 25,000 reduction?
I will definitely have an update on terms of where we're at, yeah.
May is looming.
Yeah. Yeah. But at any rate, they already voted on it, so it's official.
Yeah,
Yeah. Reduced. So.
75.
Yes,
So it's just a matter of where.
any other board member comments? No, okay, thank you. Moving on to audience response to information presented. Is there anybody online?
No.
Yeah. Okay, seeing none, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
That's from Diane, seconded by
Marianne.
Mary Ann. All right, and that would be at 9:27.
9:21. No.
What?
9:21.
Oh, 9:21, I'm sorry. 9:21.
Yes.